himself.
You're insane.
Evil is real.
Nigel Chambers from Big Gold Belt Media. Joe, thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations on the success of your new film, Abraham Boys, a Dracula story in theaters July 11th. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, and and I'm so psyched about the film. It's a really good piece of work.
It is. It truly is. And I actually had somebody from my team check it out at the world premiere at Overlook Film Festival, and that's all they kept talking about. And I just had to eventually stop answering calls because I'm like, I need to see this now. And now that I got my chance to see it and have a chance to talk to you about it, I'm very excited. Now, I got to tell you, I was today years old when I realized something. You're gonna be like, what? And maybe not. Maybe you may have heard this before, but when I saw obviously you listed as a writer and then with the credit of short story by Joe Williams, my first thought was short film. And I was writing my question. And obviously the big question is, when you take a short film to a feature length, what's sort of that process for you? And obviously you've done it before with the Black Phone, but I realized it's just short story. And you've
Right.
obviously have wrote novels, you've done comics, like you've done it all. So I wanted to know, like, what really is the process? What essentially is a short story and separates it from everything else? Why that's the decision to do a short story, and then ultimately how does it evolve to a feature film?
So the crazy thing about Abraham's Boys is I wrote Abraham's Boys 22 years ago, and I was paid $150 for it. And the idea that 2 decades later, it's this wonderful motion picture, this very sort of, hand on the throat, scary, suspenseful film. That's weird. I mean, that's really, really weird, that something I did so long ago is now this incredible thing that's out in the world.
Yeah.
I wrote the short story because I couldn't sell novels. I had written 3 or 4 novels that no one wanted to buy. I was a failed novelist. But I had started to write scary short stories, and a couple of those short stories had won prizes and got in a best of collection. And, so this woman, Jean Cavalos, was pulling together a collection of stories about Van Helsing, because there was going to be the Hugh Jackman film. And so it was sort of a cash in on the Hugh Jackman film. And I thought, I'm getting in that collection. That'll be a high profile collection. A lot of people are going to buy it. So I'm going to write a story about Van Helsing. And then the question was, what do I have to say about this, this classic character from Dracula? And the thing I settled on was, what would it be like to be his kid? What would it be like if Van Helsing was your father? Because this is a guy who runs around, who spends all his time, hunting the infected dead, the vampire, he finds people who are vampires and he, puts the stake through their heart and then chops off their head and stuffs garlic in the mouth. And, they're evil, so that makes him a good guy, I guess. But you spend all your time doing that, you kind of sound like Ted Bundy. So I was thinking, I'm right. Like, I mean, it's kind of a weird evening pastime. That's not how I want to spend my night. So
Yeah.
I think if you were his kid, you'd be kind of weirded out.
Yeah, yeah. And one other thing, really quickly, if you can answer. So initially, the film was just Abraham Boys, and I see that we added a Dracula story. If you can, what is sort of the decision behind that to
It's a marketing thing. It's a marketing thing because I think the fear is not enough people know who. Well, if you say Abraham's Boys, I think people might say, well, what Abraham are we talking about? And
And,
so
and all
you
those
have to
stories have
say,
been interesting anyway, so you might still want to, see what this was about.
right,
I feel
right.
you.
So I think marking it out as a Dracula story is a way of letting there be no confusion. We're talking about Van Helsing.
Yeah.
That works for me. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, truly. I'm so fascinated by your resume and your work that I've seen, obviously. And I couldn't help but to take a moment to say, like, what is next? What is in your deck of cards? And I would have to lobby, directing needs to be in there at some point. But What do you feel
Well,
is next in your
well, I don't
journey?
know. I got paid $35 for a short story called The Black Phone, and I wrote that one 20 years ago too. And it was made into an
Wow.
extraordinary motion picture. I mean, Scott Derrickson's The Black Phone is awesome, and
Yeah.
it's coming out. There's going to be a sequel in October.
Yeah.
In terms of directing, I hang out with Scott. I know who Scott is. He's a great guy. Scott spends every hour of the waking day thinking about how to direct a film well, and so in terms of me directing, that's a little bit like me saying, I'd like to fly a 747 someday. I mean, like, no, no, I don't think so. Um, this October, I've got a new novel out called King Sorrow. It's enormous. It's like 900 pages. If you drop it on your foot, it'll break your foot. But it's a big thriller that takes place across 25 years about a dragon set loose on America, and we've got fights between dragons and F-16s and
Yeah.
tanks and stuff, and a lot of action. And so that's this October.
I'll be there to talk about it for sure. Hey,
Sounds
listen,
good.
if there's one thing I know from talking to you right now, I mean, never say never because for $35 in one thing and 100 in
Right?
another, and then 20 years later, and then here we are.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. You never know.
Hey, listen, I think I got for one quick last question. The monologue at the end of the film is really fascinating for you.
Yeah.
I wonder what is it for you, in terms of writing the story and obviously collaborate with Natasha, who's fantastic.
Amazing.
When it's all said and done and it's the time to get up from the seat and we hear this very righteous dialogue, which I mean, let's just be honest now, no better person could have did this than Titus. What is
Oh
it the
yeah.
reaction you want from folks to take away from that final moment when we hear that?
I think I want them psychologically shattered and emotionally scarred. I don't want them. I want them to feel like they just can't go on. No, no. I think it's interesting to reflect on a person who has himself become monstrous and his self-knowledge about the things he did and the choices he made that made him monstrous. And that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. The way people choose to destroy themselves.
Mm,
So it's a chilling, sort of dark story. It's not the kind of thing where you surf out of the theater laughing.
yeah.
But I think there's a lot there to sort of chew over.
All right, all right. Well, as always, I just such a pleasure to talk to you and finally meet you and following your work. Much like the Black Phone, as we talked about, and other projects we could talk about as well too. This is another one I highly suggest that the fans check out. So, Joe, thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations, and once again, Abraham Boyd's A Dracula Story in theaters July 11th. Thank you for your time, brother.
It's great talking to you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Ridiculous.